Well, breaking news on the battle to retake Mosul and what it might mean for our own national security. A new piece in the Wall Street Journal reporting the offensive highlights the risk of fighters fleeing elsewhere, saying, quote, U.S. and European officials said they have not changed their assessment that as Islamic State loses territory, young men who traveled from Europe to fight with the group will seek to return. The Mosul attack may inspire radical people to act or eventually return more fighters to Europe, said a U.S. official. Here now with more on this, Tom Joscelyn, senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy, senior editor of the Long Word Journal. So the image that comes to mind is poking a hornet's nest, right? You start poking that nest and suddenly the hornets go elsewhere. What do you think is the real risk of the battle in Mosul having impact in Europe and even closer to home?
Well, I think you could certainly see this sort of reverse flow of foreign fighters, both from Iraq and Syria, as Islamic State continues to lose ground. But keep in mind, they've already infiltrated throughout Europe with foreign fighters. So there's already that growing threat. The threat's been there now for 18 months, however long. The bottom line, too, is that they're also using foreign fighters to defend Mosul. So they deployed Chechen fighters, for example. The Chechen commanders were deployed south of Mosul earlier this year to basically draw the defensive lines. And other foreign fighters from other countries have been deployed as well. You know, in the last 24 hours, the Islamic State has come out and said that 58 suicide attacks have been committed around Mosul as they try and defend the city. Now, we can't independently confirm that statistic, but it sounds about right. And probably a good number of those suicide bombers are, in fact, foreign fighters.
I'm so curious about your assessment of what's happening in Mosul based on what we know from social media, because I know that's something you look at closely. Obviously, you look at what ISIS is putting out as propaganda. What's your sense of what Mosul means?
Well, I mean, it means a lot to the Islamic State. Remember, they've been telling everybody for years now that this is part of the caliphate. For a couple of years, this has been one of the great seats of the so-called caliphate, and losing it would be a big blow to the organization. They will continue to fight on, even if they lose it, though, and we've talked about this in the past, where they have an incredible insurgency capability. They were a guerrilla army before they were anything else, and so they'll just return to those tactics. And also, we've seen that they've been able to lash out at the West, that they have this capability to hit the West and commit terrorist attacks. And one of the things we've discovered is that they've basically improvised this system where they remote control terrorists in Europe.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that, because we see the map, we see how close Mosul is to Turkey, you know how close Turkey is to Europe, but you say even just looking at the physical map is less important than this remote controlled strategy they
Well,
might
I would
have.
say
What is that?
they're equally important. It's two different ways of doing it. One way of doing it is, of course, send foreign fighters back to Europe to commit attacks. Another way to do it is digitally. What they've done is they've set up this system where basically ISIS supporters or people who want to go fight for ISIS but can't make it can basically commit an attack in their home country by corresponding with an operative online. This handler walks them through their attack. And I'll give you a great example of this. In Ansbach, Germany, this last summer, there was an Afghan refugee teenager who wanted to support ISIS. To the moment he walked onto a train where he hacked the passengers with a machete, the moment right before that, he was actually corresponding with an ISIS handler via probably his phone or a computer or something along those lines, and was actually saying, okay, I'm going to begin now. That's how much remote control this can be. And this is very interesting because these are small-scale attacks. They're not big operations. But what the quiet part of this war is that the U.S. and European officials have been trying to fight these remote control terrorists.
It's a buddy system.
It's a buddy system. It's a very interesting way of improvising on some problems. You know, they know that even though they've been able to infiltrate Europe with foreign fighters and something along those lines, there's still a pool of would-be supporters who maybe their travel is limited. And this is a great way to try and help them.
I didn't get to al-Qaeda. I always like to ask you about al-Qaeda. Just any quick thought. I only have about 30 seconds.
Well,
but because we're focusing so much on ISIS, I don't want to forget what's happening.
Over and over again, I tell everybody al-Qaeda is still alive. It's growing. It has grown. It's not dead. And ISIS did not succeed in the global jihad.
So we have to remember that. I always just want to make sure we keep our perspective very global when we look at terror. Tom, great to have you. Thank you. John?